Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suttress here, and I'm glad that it looks like my intros have entertained Brian Stelfreeze. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Dude, it's excellent to be here, man. That is a really cool intro, man. Love it.
The animation, my buddy William Meyer made that for me 13 years ago when I wasn't doing any video, and now finally doing video. It's like, all right, I got a use for it. So isn't that great?
Cool. Totally cool, man. Oh, how's it been?
I'm doing okay, man. How about you? How's how are you coping? I mean, I'm doing. I'll tell you how I'm coping. I'm doing video interviews instead of just audio, and that's why I'm glad to talk to you today.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about it is, I think for most of us comic book artists, things really haven't changed at all. I think things have been absolutely the same. You know, go into the studio, don't talk to anyone, kind of hang out, and then go home. Don't talk to anyone, hang out. So I think for comic book artists, there's outside of the lack of conventions, which is a real loss. Yeah. I think things haven't changed at all.
I understand, man. Well, I'm really excited for your Kickstarter campaign that you've got going. I've got a couple of images here of yes. Thomas River, Super Spy. Tell me about him.
Dude, really excited about it because this is one of those ideas that sort of Doug and I have been playing with it for a while, and it's something that doesn't quite fit in the direct market because it's not kind of a superhero based thing. So since the direct market kind of took a break for a little while, we kind of just started getting a lot more serious about the work that we were doing on this book, and we just kind of started seeing a lot of things happening on Kickstarter and started realizing that Kickstarter is kind of a real viable option for us. So we just decided to jump into it.
No, I understand, man. And honestly, that's kind of been the continuing conversation I've had with creators like yourself at Brubaker and others that when the direct market was put on pause to, the various alternative ways you could put out product. Now, 12 gauge, you're the art director, correct, for 12 gauge?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And man, I've known about you guys for years, obviously. I remember meeting Rosario Dawson when her, was it a cult crime division?
Oh yeah, dude, that was a great hangout, man. That was a great hangout.
But that's what I was going to say. Like 12 gauge, that and your other books, they from the studio, they have been non-superhero projects, haven't they?
Yeah, in fact, the company started on the premise of doing sort of Southern Gothic, sort of crime stories. So that alone puts us just to the side of what would be mainstream in comics. And we really kind of consider ourselves a boutique and more artist-friendly comic book publisher, and that's been working out great for us. And in fact, the original intent of doing Thomas River was to do it as an image book, but then everything went on hold for a period of about nearly 4 months. So we kind of went, well, the pandemic has a big effect on comic book stores and the direct market, but it has absolutely no effect on Kickstarter. So I think, and actually from the things that are blowing up on Kickstarter now, it seems like that's not a unique idea by any means.
Understood. Give us the 10-cent pitch on Thomas River and what the book is all about.
Well, the 10-cent pitch of Thomas River is he is a different kind of super spy that takes on different kinds of super spy missions. That was the whole thing. Like Doug and myself, we're not like filthy rich guys. We're not the born affluent or anything like that. We weren't born in a Skyfall mansion in England, or in New England or anything like that. And to us, we had this kind of idea that you have these elite spies that are making decisions of right and wrong. What would happen if just a kind of a regular guy, a knock-around guy that grew up in the neighborhood, got himself to the position where he's making those decisions? Would those decisions be different decisions? It's not the fate of the rich, it's the fate of everyone. So we wanted to kind of explore that story for a little while, and quite honestly, a lot of it comes from the inequities that we've been feeling with like a lot of the political things that have been happening lately. So I think creativity is our way of screaming into a pillow,
And I'm glad, I'm glad that's the reaction, and creativity is coming from the frustration. Here's another cover that everyone can look at. And again, Doug Wagner and yourself, and is Michelle Paust, is that your colorist?
Yeah, Michelle Paust is the colorist, and Ed Dukeshire is the letterer.
Very cool, man. No, I'm excited to read this, and I'm a big spy fan, and I love what can be done with the genre, and also not only the challenges politically and how the political landscape has changed, but also how technology has changed the spy business. I think. Yeah.
And dude, you are digging right into our heads on that, because it's not like we're really not modeling this after James Bond. We're really not modeling this after The Bourne Identity. We're really not modeling it after a John le Carré spy novel. We're kind of like modeling some of it from our experience, and both Doug and I are tech nuts, and it's just like we're kind of jumping into that. Well, how do we solve this problem? And then how do we solve this problem? And if you had all the technology available, what would you do as a spy? So we're really kind of having fun with it, and we hope that people enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed working on it.
That's great. I watched your video, and you said that the book is done, but obviously, I'm sure you have stretch goals. How long do you envision the story being? Are you going to put it out in chapters, or is it going to be a graphic novel? What's the plan?
We're definitely going to put the initial story out in chapters, and what we're going to do is, after we've finished everything, then we're going to do a graphic novel, and we're still on the fence. And this is one of the things that we've enjoyed about Kickstarter, is the fact that you don't have to make a final decision. So sure, we're kind of in that position of, well, maybe we might release the graphic novel as a direct market book, or we might release the graphic novel, cut a deal with one of the book companies that we've been talking with. So that's still up in the air, and that's something that we reserve the right to even do it with Kickstarter. But we're going to do the initial chapters of the story as Kickstarter books, all of them.
And how many chapters for the story do you think, or is that still in progress as well?
Well, we know how many pages the story is.
Sure.
But right now we're kind of doing now it's this many pages. Should we make that 3 books of this size, or should we make that 4 books of that size? So kind of like being a little bit flexible, and the cool thing about it is which is very different for us, and it's a whole new paradigm that we have to wrap our heads around. Generally, as an artist, I think in terms of, I've got to do these things to satisfy the editor, and then the editor's got to do these things to satisfy the publisher, and then the publisher has to do these things to satisfy the distributor and the comic book shop owner, and
Yep.
the last decision is the fans.
Yeah.
And Kickstarter takes that paradigm and flips it on its head. So now we're in this position of, okay, let's talk to the fans. I mean, Doug and I have a talk to the fans every Tuesday and Thursday, and just say, hey, you got suggestions, you got questions, sort of hit us with it. And those decisions affect us moving forward. So we're kind of really having a good time with it. And it's really different to kind of go, well, what do the fans want? And rather than kind of putting ourselves in a position where we're asking a retailer to give up a Marvel and give up a DC book that they know they can sell and take a chance on our book. We're just kind of printing comics now, and it's actually kind of fun.
I can appreciate that. Absolutely. Were you, this is the kind of conversation I had with Ed Brubaker regarding that Friday's book he's doing with Marcos Martin for Panel Syndicate. And not even to worry about, well, it's got to fit in 20 pages because that's the paradigm. You got to do it that way.
Yes.
And you guys have that flexibility of, no, if you need more pages, that's great for every chapter or, whatever. I think that's terrific. And again, as you say, it's a product that can go directly to the fans. How do you, when you say you communicate them, are you doing Facebook Live? Are you doing private video chats?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
We're doing an Instagram sort of a broadcast. Like,
sure.
It's our T2 broadcast. We're doing it on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2:00.
Okay.
And we kind of like throw questions out there, sort of and encourage people to kind of interact with us and just kind of see what they think. I mean, the interesting thing about this is, I mean, you said, hey, I'm a big spy espionage fan, but like even the James Bond book in the direct market is only doing moderate.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like it's kind of weird that like the top spy espionage guy is doing moderate in the direct market. But we have come across so many people that were big fans of spy espionage. So we can do a slightly different book, a little bit more of a boutique book here. So we're really kind of enjoying that.
Well, and I imagine too, once whatever graphic novel version you guys decide on, and again, another kind of conversation I've had in the past with people like Greg Rucka with his crime comics and stuff, and Ed for that, and Brubaker as well. To go.
You're naming like all my inspirations right now.
Oh, that's good.
That's really cool.
That's great. Well, and they will pitch their finished books to bookstores because I mean this is the thing, Brian. And again, this is a continuing conversation, especially during the pandemic, but even before that, where the direct market is so superhero specific. And look at everything that's happening in comics outside of the big two. The success of people like Renee Telgemeier and the YA books. Yeah. And by the same token, guys like Rucka and Brubaker that, knock it out of the park with their non-superhero straight up crime books, or, something like, was it Velvet? The book that Brubaker did that with Steve Epting?
Yeah. And it's really kind of cool because, it's just creative exploration, and it reminds me that this same thing happened with the movie studios, where there were a handful of movie studios that owned all the theaters, and they were just producing movies for those theaters, and that's it. And those like little tiny like little slice of life movies and stuff like that, they just didn't get made because that's not what was being sold to their theaters. And then the Hollywood system broke up, and it became about directors, about writers, about stars. So the creative people drove things. And then the same thing happened in, it took another 30 years, but the same thing happened to music. And I think, 20 years later, the same thing is starting to happen with comics. I remember going to Japan almost 20 years ago and looking at their comic book market. I mean, they got comic books about tennis players and baseball, which kind of blows my mind.
You're right.
And it was like, it wasn't just a specific genre of comics. It was everything. Comics was just, they considered it a great form of storytelling. And I think we're finally catching up to that. And I'm not knocking superhero comics. I'm not knocking the direct market. I think the direct market is fantastic for what it serves, but the direct market doesn't serve everyone. I mean, there are people that won't go into a comic book shop, mainly because a comic book shop is inconvenient to them, or they just would like comics to be delivered to their house. And those are the people that we're going for.
That's cool. Who have been your Kickstarter gurus? Because obviously, as you say, it is, it's the business side is as important as the creative side. And I mean, I know it requires a lot of attention.
Oh, it requires a lot of attention. It requires a lot of vigilance. Of course, you can't help but draw inspiration from the Boom guys, what they did with the Keanu Reeves book.
Sure.
Snyder's book, and Snyder has kind of given us a couple of shout outs and everything like that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's been just really incredible. And it's kind of like one of the things that I really appreciated about comics is that transition from being a fan of comics to being a comic book professional was really about community, and it's weird for me to even say that all the guys and girls that I was fans of when I was reading comics, I've met them personally. I've hung out with them. I have them on my phone. It's like it's really cool being able to call up Walt Simonson and just like, hey, Walt, how's it going? And I still have that fanboy inside of me. So that I think is one of the awesome things about comics is it's small enough for it to be a community and for all of us to sort of see each other at conventions and say hey to each other. So that's cool. And I think that thing is starting to happen in Kickstarter, where it's like there's a Kickstarter comic book community and we kind of know each other. And when one person's, sort of book actually like, makes its goal, everybody in the communities are real excited. We give shout outs to each other. It's just been really fantastic.
I hear you, man. And truly, in the 12 years or so that Kickstarter has been around, it's been fun watching it develop. Also, obviously, GoFundMe and the other platforms like that raise money for personal projects. Hey, I'm a Patreon guy with my podcast,
totally.
And
that's the thing. That's the thing that's blowing me away about all of this is having the ability to interact. That's one of the things that I really love about conventions is having that ability to interact with the fans, having the ability to talk to them and find out what they're liking, find out what they're excited about, and just because I think the cool thing is we're all fanboys anyways. We're all total fanboys. I'm the kid that was in the comic book shop, sort of hanging around with my friends, trading comics and reading stuff. And conventions give you the ability to do that. So I really see all of this as kind of a natural extension of that.
My buddy Ryan Brown, I don't know if you know Ryan, God Hates Astronauts. He was a great Kickstarter success story for the same reason, man. No, he put it out there, and like you said, all the like-minded creators that he was friends with helped him out. And it's true. It's interesting how the Kickstarter community is a very positive comic book force, independent of the direct market.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that is that I think is a great example of not only a story but a style that doesn't quite fit in the DC or Marvel plug. It's something that's completely unique, but it's not unique and only a few people like it. It's unique and popular. It just has to And I really love the fact that he actually found a way to get it out to people. So so it's really I think there was always this baseball analogy that we would use as trying to get into comics, which is like you get in and you work on one of the farm teams. It's just like if you can manage to get a job at one of the farm teams like Dark Horse Comics or Innovation Comics or one of those little guys, and you did a really good job, maybe you can get called up to the big leagues and go to Marvel or DC. But I think that that whole structure, that whole paradigm has been broken, and for a good thing now. So we're really seeing some very different comics and very interesting comics.
Well, and people like yourself that obviously made their mark at DC and Marvel can take that audience with you and hopefully support these independent things. No, I agree. I would make the analogy that where DC and Marvel used to be the pinnacle, now it's almost like college, where you kind of it's like, hey, I'm here, I'm doing my DC and Marvel stuff. Okay, now everybody knows who I am. Now I'm going to do my creator-owned stuff. Hey, everybody, come along with me, and I'll continue my career. And every now and then, as I'm sure you're still doing plenty of DC and Marvel work, but I think this is great, and I'm really glad that you're making this move.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I enjoy, is that it's an option. I'm still going to be doing direct market books. I'm still going to be doing because I'm just an insatiable fanboy. I'm still going to be doing stuff for Marvel. Still going to be doing covers and everything for DC because, man, I love myself some Batman and some Spider-Man. But at the same time, for those personal stories that I want to tell, that doesn't include those characters, I like having the option of going to Image if it's maybe a superhero or something related, and I like the idea of going to Kickstarter if it's something really far off the beaten path.
That's awesome, man. I've actually got a couple. I looked on your Twitter feed and found some great art commission covers that you did on the blank covers. So,
dude, love doing it, man.
Yeah. That's a great Catwoman, man. That's fantastic.
Oh man, Catwoman, man. I feel that Catwoman is some unfinished business. At some point, I'm gonna have to jump in on DC and get a Catwoman, like either graphic novel or miniseries going. So that's a little bit of unfinished business right there.
That sounds amazing. That would be terrific. And then there's a good Miles Morales.
Yes. Yeah, Miles is one of those characters that it took me a while. It took me a while to kind of like sort of really find the love for Miles. But when I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I was just like, okay, that's who the character is. I'm in.
That's cool. Tell us about that, because but truly drawing Miles compared to Peter, that's like almost a subconscious thing. I mean, yes, when it's in color, there is a difference to the costume. But yeah, tell me whatever intangibles it took for you to figure out Miles.
Well, the crazy thing about it is Miles is a slight. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in the character, but I think Miles has a confidence that Peter doesn't have, and I think because Miles has that confidence, I play him a lot bigger than Peter. So that's a lot of fun. I see Peter like it's and you'll catch this, but I don't know how much most people will catch this. But I see Miles as a nerd, but Peter as a geek. And I think that's awesome. That's what separates the two characters. So Miles, because he's a nerd, sort of about like art and tagging and all that stuff. I play him with a little bit more confidence than I would play Peter, because Peter's like a total science geek.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Here's one more. Venom.
Ah, dude.
Terrific.
Love that character, man. Yeah, that character is basically saying to an artist, all the chains are off, do whatever you want. You know?
I can appreciate that artistically. I got to be honest. I liked him better when he really was a villain, and now that he is kind of that anti-hero thing, I'm like, you know. And it's funny, David Michelini. I had the chance to sit with him on a panel and asked him about the evolution of Venom, and he's like, yeah, I kind of wish he was still a bad guy because you know, he's done things when I was writing him that were irredeemable in his mind.
Well, that's the crazy thing about it is I think there's sort of a pro wrestling quality, you know, that happens in comics sometimes, where like once a character gains a certain level of popularity, then they try to go, well, let's justify his actions. let's try to make the character, you know, redeemable or good in some way. And I think that's one of those characters that is, you know, I'm the guy that I prefer Darth Vader as evil. You know?
Yeah.
It's just like, and when Darth Vader bailed in the last movies, I was just like, oh, okay, I'm done with these movies.
I was bummed that we had that great vision or visual of the burnt out helmet of Vader in the hands of Kylo Ren, and to not get a scene, even if it was an illusion by Snoke or whomever or the Emperor at the end, but that there was no confrontation between Vader and Kylo Ren, I think was like when they always say that, you know, if the Robert McKee in story, when he would talk about story writing, if you got a gun on the wall and at the beginning of your movie, somebody's got to fire it before the end of the movie. It's that kind of thing.
There was those two trains were coming together, and we wanted to see them collide, you know, but they just kind of like off screen. You know?
I'm with you, man. Are you a Star Trek person?
I am you. Okay, I'm a Star Trek person. I'm a Star Wars person. All of that stuff. But I got to tell you, I'm a classic guy. You know, I'm a Star Trek, a tried and true Star Trek classic guys. I mean, I watch everything, you know, except for I haven't caught up with the newest stuff that's coming out now. But you know, Voyager, you know, sort of next gen, Enterprise, all of that stuff. I've checked it out, but I'm definitely a classic guy.
I'm with you on all that too, and I watched the new stuff. I got to tell you, I'm personally disappointed in it. They're almost playing at Star Trek to me, and not really. They kind of forgot what Star Trek was, and they think they're going along the same lines, but it's and they really pride themselves on inclusiveness. But it's like, Star Trek was always inclusive and didn't have to like rub it in your face. It was just part of the show. I mean, you know, from the original series through the 90s and into the 2000s, it's like, no, man, we had women captains, and we had women leads, and we had people of color. You know, I don't know.
The thing that I think really gets me about that, and I think it ends up being a bit of a problem, is especially with ongoing genre, and once it reaches a certain level of popularity, and I feel the same oftentimes with comics, is one of the things like to a certain extent, I kind of equate Stan Lee's writing with classic Trek. You know, it was always that moral quandary. It was always that exploration of the human condition. Like we could see ourselves in Spider-Man. We could see ourselves in the Hulk. We could see ourselves in Batman, Superman, and all those stories were about that, more so than about the depth of the continuity of the character. And I think getting away from that and now exclusively trying to service the continuity is what kills the story. Because the reason why we were interested in these stories is because of their exploration of the human condition. And I think the new Trek stuff has kind of lost that. Now they're about, you know, okay, we're going to have this ship do all this weird, cool moving all over space, and it's just really about the tech and about the politics and all of that, and it's not about the human condition anymore. And I'm gonna throw out the same thing about like the Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, all of those comics. I think when the stories are at their best is when the writer isn't concentrating on continuity, but is concentrating on the human condition. All of our best stories, going back as far as we can remember, are about things where we were Spider-Man in that position, where we were, Wolverine in that position, and having to face that like loss of self, loss of soul, loss of friendship. And I think when you have something that runs for so long, and the kids of the people that started it are now writing it,
Yeah,
it starts to get there's such an easy possibility for the sauce to get a little weakened.
right. They're almost handcuffed by continuity rather than finding new stories in it. Jerry Conway and I talked last Monday, and
Wow.
and they, I know, believe me, I felt wow, it's just like you, man. I swear, getting to talk to Simonson and Conway and Paul Kupperberg and all these old greats and everything, and it blows my mind. If my 9-year-old self would have known this was going to happen.
Oh, dude, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've said that, and I think one of the things that and it sort of ties this whole thing together, which is I think a lot of times it's cool to do something different. It's cool to the idea of like untread snow, tabula rasa, that is so interesting creatively, and I think that's what's happening. That's what's happening to a lot of these creators. It's just like, oh yeah, I do want to tell that story about Batman, and there's this interesting thing that happened in this story that Jim Aparo worked on, and I'd like to explore that in a Batman story of my own. Yeah, I want to do that, but at the same time, I want to do some new stuff. Like I think one of the most apt things said on this point was former studio mate and lifetime friend Cully Hamner. He said that a lot of times being a comic book sort of fan is almost like being a Civil War reenactor. Where like all the battles, all the little tiny events that happened that led up to sort of these different things, and you want to reenact them. You want to get with your buddies who all of them also know all these things about all these details, and you want to get on a field and play soldier. And oftentimes when you're doing comics and when you're reading comic book stories, it's like Civil War historians, who are just like reliving all those great battles,
Right, and you're right, and treating them like, again, you can't mess with those. And I totally get that. Cully's one of my guys as well, and he and I have had many a Star Trek conversation over the years.
Oh, dude, Cully's knife cuts deep on Star Trek.
I'm with you, man. I'm absolutely with you.
The text, that I always put out there, and I always like casually test people, where I'll say, well, the episode where Spock and Kirk went in the past, and Cully will say, "Sitting on the Edge of Forever." It's like, okay, the titles, so you're an up level Star Trek,
or the 60s with.
So let's go with that.
Yeah, or like Assignment Earth when they stop World War III. With absolutely. Or who's the other? Or Tomorrow Is Yesterday, where the fighter pilot they have to beam him up because they break his fighter jet and everything.
Yeah, you see that? That is bona fides. You know, that's you have to. What that is, in my opinion, that's the Masons like secret handshake. You know?
I'm totally with you, man. No, and
if you pass that secret handshake, then okay, yeah, you can come and talk with us men about Star Trek.
exactly, exactly. You're in the club. All right, fine. Sit down. We can talk. It's cool. That's hilarious, man. What about writing for yourself, Brian? I mean, I'm glad you're doing this with Doug, but have you written and drawn your own comics?
Yeah, the cool thing about it is I've written like sort of a story at Marvel in one of their early issues of X-Men Unlimited, and I mean the wacky thing about it is I think as an artist you should actually be interested in the process of writing. And I think as a writer, you should really explore the process of drawing because, in my opinion, storytelling is a very elusive thing, and it always kind of kills me when people will try to say, well, the writer is like the director of a movie. No, the artist is like the director of a movie, and it's just like that analogy doesn't apply at all.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the storytelling is the director of the movie. And there are times when the writer is the writer is entirely responsible for the story, but they're also somewhat responsible for some of the storytelling. And then you have the artist that's completely available for, sort of he has to or she has to deliver the art, but they're also responsible for the storytelling.
Absolutely.
And that's that like little mixture where both artist and writer kind of blend together to create. And for me, that's what happens when these great teams, when you get the Wolfman Perez, when you get like the Miller Sienkiewicz, sort of when you get like, sort of the, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, where you cannot tell where the writing stops and where the art begins. That's pure storytelling right there.
Completely agree.
But for me, one of the things that I think is tough is I'm super difficult on myself as an artist. I always look at what I do with a heavy critical eye, and I am 10 times worse on myself as a writer. so it's a little bit I'm definitely in the near future going to be taking on a few more writing assignments. But that's something that's a real sort of heavy lift to get it past sort of my inspection.
Do you does it slow you down art wise because you're so critical of what you're putting down?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what for me, and again, it points back to the previous comment. When I can get out of being an artist and lean more into being a storyteller, then everything has its own flow to it, and it's like I can sort of get out of my way, and just like sort of trust that I know what I'm doing and just kind of let things happen. And I think one of the most important things about that is having a good story. Having a good story that I'm really passionate about. I mean, we used to have a joke at Gaijin Studios, which was if you get a bad story, then it's time to like cut the writer loose. Where you basically go, okay, writer, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you loose. I'm just going to do some awesome art here. And on those occasions when we have a review that said, the art was great, but the writing was horrific, we're like, yeah, sorry about that, dude. Had to throw you under the bus.
But I was going to say, by the same token, great art can really hide all the mistakes of a subpar script.
Oh yeah. And now what I kind of do is I demand to see the writing before I commit to doing the art.
Okay.
And that's it's not necessarily a really good career move to do that, but what it does is it guarantees that I'm working on stuff that I'm inspired by, and it guarantees that my output is only really cool books. Like when I got asked to do Wednesday's comics, I was just like, okay,
yeah,
this sounds really cool, but about this writing, you know, and when I saw like what Walt was doing, I'm like, oh hell yeah, let's do this. And even with Black Panther, I got offered Black Panther, and my attitude is, yeah, I want to do Black Panther, but if I committed to Black Panther and it was an awful story, that would be the worst thing in the world. You know, that would be a living hell to have to work on a character that I love on a terrible story. So it was touch and go because they didn't want to make any announcements on, you know, the fact that Ta-Nehisi was writing it. So they were like, well, we can't tell you who's writing it. And I immediately went, well, okay, get somebody else. And the cool thing was Will Moss was actually kind of trusted me enough and was sharp enough to kind of filter all of Ta-Nehisi's name away from the script and all the metadata from the script and sent it to me and said, okay, here's the writer's proposal. And I read that, and God, I was excited about it. I was just like, wow, this is something I really want to do. And then he told me the name, and I immediately thought, dude, you are an idiot. You are about to turn that down. You know?
Yeah, but you don't know. I mean, that's and even truly, as great of a writer as Ta-Nehisi is, you know, writing, as you well know, writing comics is unique to other kinds of writing. So tell me, because I'm so glad you brought both of these examples up, because I want to hear about working with Walter too on the demon stuff for Wednesday's comics. And right now I'm blanking. It was the demon and
Demon and Catwoman.
It was Catwoman. Okay, great.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, it was as if they tailor made it for me. You know? So I was just like, okay. Well, this is extortion and entrapment here. You know?
And that was its own formatic.
Yeah, Walt Simonson, Catwoman, and Demon. Really? You know? But yeah,
it's epic. But let's go back to Ta-Nehisi because, yeah, like I said, I mean, again, great writer and obviously massive comic fan, but even was kind of coming towards it with his metadata and the way he was writing in a different way. So yeah, like how did that collaboration work?
Well, the cool thing about it is, and I thought it was like just a perfect arranged marriage because I had worked with Will Moss on a Jonah Hex story back when he was at DC Comics.
Okay.
And what was really cool about the Jonah Hex story was that I kind of had a loose conversation with Jimmy about what the story was going to be about. And then he like wrote the script with Justin and they turned the script in. And I called up Jimmy and I said, hey, dude, you mind if I just run with this? And he was just like, hey, do whatever you want. And I was just like, okay, cool. So I basically concentrated less on the point by point, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, and concentrated more on the actual storytelling and really making it feel like a spaghetti Western. And it was really cool talking to Will because Will had read the script and he would kind of get the pages and go, oh man, dude, you're taking this all over the place. And then later I met Will at a New York show and he came up to the table and I didn't know what he looked like. So I just kind of saw this guy at the table and this kid came up for a portfolio review. And I gave him a portfolio review and the kid's art was really good. So the review was entirely about storytelling. And Will just kind of went, wow, man, that's cool. So now Ta-Nehisi is coming into comics. So Will kind of thought, well, this guy knows about comic book storytelling. maybe he can actually do a little bit of sort of in a sense policing of what Ta-Nehisi was doing. And the coolest thing about that was that Ta-Nehisi, phenomenal writer, but zero ego.
That's awesome.
I mean, just absolutely zero ego. And I got his script for the first issue, and I started laying out the pages, and I sent him my layouts, and he would look at the layouts and go, "Oh, you changed this. Did you change it because of this and this and this?" And I go, "Yeah." And it was just a real great dialogue through that first issue, where he'd constantly ask what was happening, or he would tell me, "I see what you did there." Rather than cutting away to the separate scene, you held on that scene. And it was just really, really fantastic. And I got to tell you, man, that guy was like the Borg. I mean, it was just like information would go in, and he would then own it and throw it back at you in ways that you didn't think about. So it was just like phenomenal working with somebody who is so creative, and again, so flexible, and it was like, I'll tell you a great example. The Kimoyo beads, that came from his first script. And in his first script, he wanted to cut away to different scenes. And I kind of thought, I don't like cutting away to a scene within a scene. That works in movies, but you can lose the narrative in comic.
Understood.
So I kind of went, well, what if we created these things where rather than cutting away to a scene, a person could just call that scene up on their wrist, So that was to solve a script problem, and he was just like, okay, cool, yeah, that would be nice to do that. And then he started incorporating that into the story all throughout the story. And then once we've created this device, it was like, well, they're beads. Maybe we can use them for other stuff. Maybe this is their cell phone. Maybe this is their medical device. Maybe this is what they use to do all these different things. So it really felt organic in that, okay, a person from Wakanda doesn't walk around with a laptop. A person from Wakanda has Kimoyo beads, and that's their laptop. So it was like a real cool back and forth, with no ego from either of us, but like actually creating something that was totally unique and now has become synonymous with the Black Panther kind of mythos. So it was just a great experience, and like I said, a really great arranged marriage. But now Walt Simonson, what's really cool is Chiarello, Mark Chiarello gave me a call and sort of got me on the assignment, and then after I hung up the phone with Chi, just like a little bit later, and clearly Mark contacted Walt, and Walt immediately called me, and Walt said, "So, is this going to be full script, or is this going to be Marvel style?" And I was just like, "Well, I don't know." And then Walt says, "I know the answer," and hung up the phone. And I was just like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be cool." So the cool thing about that is we were Stan and Jack. We were
That's
just
great.
Walt was just like kind of like saying, "Yeah, about this happens. Sort of do what you're gonna do. I'll react to what you do." So it was just so much fun.
That format of Wednesday's Comics too, being weekly and just that limited panel space. Honestly, it was so exciting to see you guys all do such incredible work with it, and really so many great ideas, great team ups in terms of the creators, and just fun choices of character as well.
Man. It's just an absolute honor to be even a part of such an innovative project, and it was it's weird because I think, and it's something that I've railed against like way too much, But if you're a collector of classic comic art, what's really nice is one page actually says something. You know what I mean? Like one page of comic book art, the classic stuff. If you have a Jack Kirby page, if you have a Steranko page, if you have even a John Buscema page, a little bit of story happens on that page. It's not just a series of pictures, but like, and then on top of that, the lettering is on the page. So if you have just that one page, you can hang that page on the wall, and that page represents a moment of comics. And it's really interesting. And even if someone hadn't seen the issue that page comes from, they can get that little sort of particle of story. And I think comics have kind of evolved to today where they're a little bit more about the art, but not necessarily about the storytelling.
Interesting.
So you get a series of great pictures, but one page doesn't necessarily tell a story. Oftentimes, one page is just a bunch of people standing around with their mouths open. So there's no real story kind of happening there. And one of the things that I think is the problem with this is the full script style. The full script style, a lot of what's happening isn't actually physically happening. It's happening in the dialogue. So a lot of times the artists are kind of forced to just, well, there's a lot of people are saying a lot of things, so let me leave them a lot of room to talk. And what was so nice about working with Walt is Walt told a story on every page. There was a setup, a conflict, a resolution on every page, every day, so it was just great to kind of like get this little capsule of a story. And even as an artist, it felt like, okay, I'm being thrown back in the days of the Phantom and Steve Canyon and like, sort of trying to do this one page adventure. And I think going through the whole project, a lot of the artists and writers kind of leaned into the fact that by the time you get to the last panel on the page, you need to cliffhang people for the next Wednesday. And that was just, dude, that was so much fun. That was just such a great project. And it was, as an artist, it was really cool to be excited about, okay, I've done this art and I'm doing things in this art to sort of set up Walt. I'm like throwing that LeBron James alley-oop above the hoop and hoping that Walt is going to take it and slam it home. So that was just a lot of fun.
Ed has a question. In the work with Walt for Wednesday's Comics, did you approach the art knowing the material would be printed oversized?
Oh yeah. In fact, I did my pages oversized. I did my pages kind of like the size that it was printed, and it really it's kind of, I mean, I had this kind of bifurcation of thought when I was approaching Wednesday's Comics, because I was thinking, well, as a sort of Sunday comic format.
Yes.
When I think back to the Sunday comic format, those comics weren't that detailed. But at the same time, I'm doing them oversized. So it was like really this weird thing of like, well, I'm doing them oversized, which implies more detail, but I actually wanted to feel a lot more open and a lot less cluttered in the way that I was doing the art. So it would kind of have a more of a feel of the way things did kind of back then. So when I was doing the art, I made sure that, okay, don't use any of my fine pens, don't use any of the really small brushes or anything like that. Try to make this a little bit chunky. So when you're holding it, and it's the coolest thing to me is the fact that people were sending in pictures of themselves on their easy chair, being the dad, with the sort of Wednesday's Comics opened. That really made it for me.
God, the format, the original newspaper format, I hung on to those single issues for the longest time because they really were so unique. It's
Yeah.
really one of the best things DC did in that first half of the aughts of the 2000s. So I completely agree. Now, Greg's got some Jonah Hex stories, but first I really want to ask or address what Ramsey's asking here. You're one of the biggest role models as a Black comics creator. What do you think about the current boom of interest in Black stories and heroes, which there used to be no enthusiasm in the industry?
Well, I gotta tell you, the okay, I'm first of all a Frank Herbert Dune fan, and and my joke about the emergence of African Americans in modern comics.
Mhm.
I liken it to the Fremen of Arrakis. It's like you only thought there were a few of us around, but once you released a movie that was worthy, then all the Fremen showed up. And I think the interesting thing is that that Black creators have always been around. I mean, I've got a 30-year kind of comic book career, and the thing that I have a tendency to do is I have a tendency to try to put my work first. I don't want to get work purely on my race, or purely on my sex, or purely on anything. What I am is I am a creator first, and then there's a chasm, and then my personal life kind of gets sprinkled in there.
Okay.
And I really try to make myself available, at conventions and with mentorships, because I know sometimes it really feels like things are stacked against you, and it feels like it's very difficult to get in and stay in this industry as a creator of any minority. So I think now that the internet is out there, and how creators look is kind of part of their brand, I think that's an interesting thing, because what that does is that gives people a place to draw inspiration from. Whereas when you don't know, you don't know. And I think it's important for everyone to know that their situation isn't unique, that we're all kind of part of this whole thing. So I really think the cool thing now is, and Kickstarter and these smaller companies and Line Webtoons, I think all of these companies have opened up the opportunity for different creators and different ideas. So if I had my career to do over again, if I was a sort of 18, 20-year-old creator starting right now, I'm not certain I would have made the choices that I made, because there's so many more opportunities available. I think the coolest thing about it is you can literally today just tell the story that you want to tell. If that story is a little bit more autobiographical, or if that story looks inward at your truth, then tell that story. Put that story out there. I think the interesting thing about it is Black fans, queer fans, sort of trans fans, all fans. If you put the work out there, eventually they'll discover it.
I was just talking to Ron V earlier today, and grew up in Mumbai, and it was great.
Yeah.
He was telling me that he saw Black Panther in India.
Wow!
And
wow.
yeah, and truly, as he described it, even the Indian kids just got so excited about this African story, and it was just like it was just great to see his point of view that the Black Panther story could be so universal.
Yeah, and that's that also sort of echoes back to Thomas River. I mean, what's really cool is the level of imagination that I have to engage in to imagine myself as James Bond, is a little bit crippling. It's a lot of effort involved in me imagining myself as sort of an English sort of aristocrat, as a spy, and I think for a lot of people, seeing themselves reflected in the characters, that's really inspirational. That's really kind of helpful, and for a lot of people, the one thing that they need is for someone to say, "Hey, I see you. I recognize you. You exist, and there's worth to what you do." And there's a ton of people that have inspired me, and it's really sort of humbling when I see those people, families, bringing their children to conventions to talk about Black Panther, and families kind of pointing to me and say, "See, he's a comic book artist. You can be a comic book artist," and it's really cool, and it's something that it's weird because I wasn't aware of it, but now that I am, I try to take it as seriously as I possibly can.
Understood. No, I totally understand. Now this is an interesting question that Greg has regarding Thomas Rivers. Did knowing there's a former CIA case officer in comics weigh in your head at all to try and make Rivers a little more grounded?
That there's a former CIA.
Forgive me if this has already been covered, but did knowing that there's a former CIA case officer in comics, RN, I don't know who that would be, weigh on your head at all to try to make Rivers a little more grounded? I don't know who RN would be.
Well, I think not specifically, with anyone in comics, but the cool thing is my dad is military, so.
Excuse me. He's talking about Tom King. Okay. All right. Now I understand.
Well, Tom King's opinion of this book terrifies me. The awesome thing about it is I am definitely going to get a copy in his hands. If he hasn't ordered it, he's going to get a copy, because I am just so excited about what Tom does. I love his writing. I love his Batman stuff. And every time we've gotten together for a conversation, it's like, eventually this is going to happen. It's like those two like black holes that are circling each other, and it's like this is going to happen eventually. We're going to be doing this thing. So
that'd be great, man. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Go on. You were saying about your father.
So I'm really curious as to and that's the thing is what we're trying to do is, as creators, is we're trying to take the material of imagination and turn it into the fabric of truth, and actually seeing how far we can suspend that disbelief. It's like, if I can suspend that disbelief all the way up to a CIA guy, well, then I've done it. But like that's the fun thing, and a lot of the patriotism, a lot of that stuff that is part of this comic really comes from my dad. It really comes from kind of growing up with a military dad, and seeing him in action, him dragging us along, sort of all across the U.S. to different assignments. It's like that's an important part of the story that comes from my truth.
Is Thomas a father?
No, he's not. He's a relatively young guy in this initial story. We're starting him off like sort of in his upper 20s, 30s. So he's a relatively young guy in his position.
Well, Greg was also obsessed with your Jonah Hex story, and obviously points out the rain and the use of that. And there's so many.
Oh man, okay. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this rain business.
Okay.
Okay. The coolest thing about that is like when I took on the assignment of Jonah Hex. Now I've got all of these classic Western guys, like metaphorically looking over my shoulder. I mean, sort of, I mean, just all, including guys like Jack Davis, and
John Severin, Tony Zuniga.
Yeah, dude, all of the even like Mobius and Nino, So
absolutely, hell yeah.
My thing was, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this story, and I wanted to do the story as a classic Western. So I wanted to do it all with brush. No pens for anything, everything brush, and these are the foolish decisions I made before I started working. I was just like, and no whiteout. Sort of whiteout is for chumps.
Wow.
This is all going to be like hand done, sort of beautifully rendered stuff until I got to the rain scene, and I was just like, oh, man, I committed to this. And it was just like absolutely murderous to do that stuff. But I think it really kind of ended up having a very unique kind of look to it, and there's so many spaghetti westerns that sort of and just great westerns that you remember those scenes in the rain, and I wanted to just write a love letter to all that stuff. So yeah, that was like probably the coolest thing, but the worst thing. I think by the time I got to the rain scenes, I was working for minimum wage.
I understand. Had you, obviously, were you really excited to be part of that Hex thing, given, as Greg points out, all these great artists that did it, along with you?
And at the same time, Jimmy, sort of, and Justin were just writing just these cool stories, and then the nicest thing is the conversation that I had with Jimmy was practically an elevator conversation. Jimmy was just like, so Brian, you want to do a Hex? I was just like, yeah, man, I'd like to do something. And he's just like, you serious? And I was like, yeah. And he's just like, okay, well, I'll do a story for you. You don't mind drawing horses? I was like, nah, I don't mind drawing horses. And he's like, okay, I'll get something to you. That was it. That was the entirety of our conversation, and then a script showed up. And dude, that was just so much fun, man.
Did you guys do it Marvel style, or was it
I think that one was full script, but the cool thing about it is I think it was full script, but I think Jimmy and Justin kind of went in and polished things, after they saw the pages coming in, and actually the nicest thing about and this is like some insider trading here, is I was done with everything except for the last 4 pages. And there was a friend of mine that was down in Florida that wanted to see the originals. And I took the originals down to see him. And he was like sitting at my table, flipping through these and just kind of going, oh man, I love these. And this guy walks up to the table and he's just kind of surreptitiously looking at the pages. And after my buddy got finished with it, the guy said, I want to buy the entire thing. All of it. Wow. I want to buy the cover and all of the art for the entire thing. And I was just like, okay, you got 4 more pages, and then it's a done deal. And it was cool because after doing that, that's what gave me the capital to buy my like Wacom Cintiq.
That's great, man.
And
that's awesome.
From that point, Yeah, from
Yeah.
that point on, I don't think I've done very many original pages. So-
Interesting. Wow.
so it was like, if I'm going to have to end doing original pages, that's a good one to go out on.
Absolutely. Wow, that's insane. Great story, man. That's fantastic. Hey, Warren Drummond, great storyboard artist. Stelfreeze is one of the coolest surnames I've ever heard, and he would have the talent to back it up. Absolutely, man.
Oh man, and dude, say her name. Really appreciate you, man. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, it's a shitty time. I know, Brian. And yeah.
Dude. And I think it's funny to me because sadly, a lot of times what happens is shitty times are the ingredients for great creativity. Yeah,
Yes.
it's sad. It's sad that combination exists. But I think we have a tendency to shoot from that emotional pain that happens. I think oftentimes when the comic book industry is at its worst, it produces its best. I mean, like things like Watchmen and The Dark Knight, those come from a collapsed comics industry. But when the industry is at its best and people are just like, sort of just making it rain, that's when we see just nothing but awful.
I'm
just
still with you.
garbage. And I
Yeah.
think at the same time that that also redounds to the kind of political and social and civil rights situation. A lot of times when things are at their worst, that's the fuel that gets us creators kind of angry. It gets us angry and it gets us hurt. And I think that's the thing that we have. We have the ability to apply that alchemy and turn that pain, sort of into something. And it's just like, it's tough. I think the combination of what we have to go through physically with COVID and all of this stuff, and we're forced to sit at home and watch TV. It's like we're living in a Clockwork Orange. We're forced to sit at home and have our eyes pinned back and watch nothing but violence, sort of on TV. So yeah, that's Thomas River comes from some of that sense of inequity, some of that pain, some of that disappointment, sort of some of that. I'm trying to use this as fuel, because if you don't use it as fuel, then it consumes you. And I think that's something that all creators need to invest in. And I also believe that there is sometimes a responsibility for us as creators, in that we have the ability to process experience. We can process that experience and we can reproduce that experience. And I think oftentimes people who aren't creatives, they often don't know how to process that experience. So a lot of times it's the creatives, it's the artists, it's the musician, and especially right now, it's the comedians that are coming out there and just saying stuff and making people feel that sense of catharsis, feel that sense of, oh, okay, and again, it's like, I'm not alone. I'm experiencing this with a community.
And hopefully giving hope as well in these times
of
despair. And really letting people know that as dark as it can seem, that again, I think the creatives and the way that they're able to convey what we're all going through can lead to inspiration and eventually better times. So no, I completely agree, man.
Definitely, man. Definitely. I'm feeling you.
Well, yeah, man. And seriously, so you got like just over 2 weeks left of the campaign.
Yeah.
For Thomas River. And really, again, it looks great. And I'm excited to talk to Doug in a couple days and get more information on it.
And I got to tell you, one of the coolest things, and like, when I get hired to do something for one of the companies, it is just like the safest thing in the world. It's like the pitcher walking you, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to get on first base with really no risk whatsoever.
Sure.
That is like really without any risk. And if I do this book and one person buys the book that I do for Marvel or DC, sorry guys, I still walk away with my page rate. But there's a little bit of sort of nervousness that happens, when you put something out in front of the fans. You're basically going, hey, you fan, what do you think of what I'm doing here? I mean, when Kevin at 12 gauge, sort of hit post on that, it was just like, okay, let's just see what happens here. That's like the scariest moment that you can possibly imagine. But what's awesome is the fact that it funded itself in 24 hours, and it's just like,
great, man.
Yeah. Well, what's nice is now it's like getting the message. Yes, we want you to do this comic, and it's just like, okay, cool. So now I can do it. Now I don't. There is that sense of risk. That the people that want it, not the comic book shop owner that thinks that they can sell it, but the actual people that want it have picked up the book, and that's really exciting. I mean, that's just like the coolest feeling, sort of in the world to do that, and riding out these last couple of weeks. It's just like, okay, cool, that's good, but I'm working on issue 2 now. That's the coolest thing about it is like, I've got the green light. I'm working on issue 2. We're having fun with it.
That's cool. Final question from Ed. He wants to know, shout out for Matador. Any upcoming stories to be told with Devin in that world? Did that property somehow move from Wildstorm to Image?
The cool thing about it is with Matador, technically that's a DC it was a DC project because it happened right during the merger of Wildstorm and DC.
Okay.
And we did the book, and after we did the book, Devin and I kind of thought, you know what, with this merger and all the big giant things that were happening, let's not say anything. Let's just be quiet because of this line in our contract here. And we just kept quiet for 5 years, and then a couple more years just to be certain. And then we approached them and said, hey, you guys said if you didn't do anything in this period of time, then all the rights revert to us. So the rights reverted to us, and to basically establish that, we kind of republished it at 12 gauge. So now. We own everything, and because of all the work that we had to do getting it ready for 12 gauge, it's Devin and I kind of got back together and we're talking and everything like that. And I gotta say, man, I just absolutely, sort of love that woman. I mean, she is just so much fun to work with. And we talked a little bit. So now we have an idea for an arc with the story. So that's something that we'll probably see if we can lay plans of getting back to. We dropped a little bit of spice of it at the end of the collection, but it's definitely something that's got us excited.
That's fantastic, man. That's great to hear, and I'm glad that the rights reverted back to you guys. That's wonderful. I've been bugging Devin for about 1.5 years to come back on Word Balloon. She has been on forever.
Oh man, she is great, and it's kind of cool because to a certain extent, we're like the kids of Denny O'Neil. I mean, it's just like we were some of the last group of creators that worked directly under Denny, and Denny was like an incredible hands-on guy. So it was like really nice to benefit from that inspiration-wise because of just the work that guy's done, but actual tutelage where he would look at your work and go, hey, maybe you should think about this instead of that. So yeah, that was just like we're like the last graduating class of Denny O'Neil.
It's so great to hear, man. And truly, when Denny passed, I had like 4 conversations with him over the years, and several of them in the last couple of years before he passed. Sadly, right after his wife had passed away, and he had that tough car accident, and he was just sitting at home.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Larry, his son, had reached out to me and said, "God, you did a great conversation with my dad. Would you be interested in talking to him again?" I'm like, every time I've wanted to in the last 7 or 8 years, I've just heard that he was, having another bad health episode, and I just didn't want to bother him.
Oh yeah.
So luckily, I was able to talk to him, and really, when he passed, Greg and I, Rucka, had that conversation, just as you described, about how giving of an editor he was. So that's tremendous to hear. Please,
it's absolutely fantastic. And I got to tell you, the coolest thing for me was we were doing a show, and I think I'm remembering this correctly, but it might have been in like Maine or someplace, just one of those like way New Hampshire or Maine, way up, sort of north states, and we did the show, and we were finished with the show, and then Denny asked me, hey, he's hanging out with friends, we're like, hey, let's go to dinner. So now I'm just like trying my best to suppress the fanboy while I'm having sort of dinner with Denny, and we have dinner, and we're walking from dinner back to the hotel, and we're passing by a movie theater. And Denny looks and says, hey, man, quiz show is playing in 5 minutes. You want to see it? I'm like, hell yeah. And the coolest thing in the world is the foundation of storytelling for me came from watching the movie quiz show with Denny and then going to the hotel lobby and just talking about it for a couple of hours.
Wow.
That was just so awesome. His ability to break down story in a film like that, and us going back and forth about the visuals, and it was just really just absolutely inspirational. And like there's definitely like a kind of a, that was probably the Higgs boson particle of storytelling, and that's something that is a part of everything that I've done since.
That's amazing, man. That's fantastic. Very cool. Geez, Brian, honestly, all the best, and really good luck with Thomas River. Again, you had me at hello with the concept, so that's great. I'm happy to help you guys out, and I'll be talking to Doug in a couple of days and getting more information on that. Please come back. This has really been a great conversation. It's good to get to know you.
Dude, it was just a great conversation. And again, it's like I'm surprised that we're not in the middle of a comic book shop having this conversation. I mean, it's just one of those things. And dude, it was just really fun, kind of hanging out with you. And I got to tell you, man, I love what you guys are doing. I think what this ends up doing is it's not funny books anymore. It's like having thoughtful conversations about this thing that we do that, quite frankly, has inspired us for as long as we can remember. It's just so much fun to really kind of take it as far as we can. And I'm glad you guys are actually doing everything you can with that.
Well, that's the ambition, because truly the material deserves it, Brian. I mean, honestly, and that's something that I felt. I had that period in the mid 90s where I stopped reading for a little while. And then I heard that Kevin Smith was suddenly on Daredevil, and Daredevil was good again. And discovering Brian Bendis and Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka and all these guys that have now become friends that I really do. I respect the work that's being made. And again, not just in superheroes, but the other genres and how well everything's going. I mean, I've really enjoyed the last 20 years, especially on the creator-owned side, where things have really exploded and other genres are being attacked and put out well. So seriously, you're a big part of that, man.
Well, the cool thing about it is our problem is that even though we're grown up we want that excitement that we had as kids, and comics still produces it. Sometimes it's creator owned stuff. Sometimes it's the classics. But comics still produces that stuff, and that stuff is so awesome, man.
No, I agree, and we're getting nice praise here at the end, and thank you very much, Scott Thornton. That's very kind. And please rewind, because I think this has been a great wall-to-wall conversation with Brian Stelfreeze. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to me. Congratulations with Thomas River, and all the best. I'm glad it's met its goal, but there's always stretch goals, so let's make sure with these last 2 weeks. What's that?
We're going to keep on doing it, man. Really appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. No, hang on 1 second before you leave. I just wanted to ask you something off the air, and I'm going to wrap things up. But thank you very much, Brian Stelfreeze.
All right.
Brian Stelfreeze, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Tomorrow night, we were talking about Tom King. He's going to be on Word Balloon. So I'm going to have to ask him about this potential collaboration with Stelfreeze. I think that's a great idea. Until then, stay safe, stay happy.